Are you struggling to connect Microsoft Power BI Desktop to a remote MySQL server that requires SSH authentication? You're not alone. This is a common challenge many users face, and today we're going to tackle it together. I completely understand how frustrating it can be when you can connect to your local MySQL database without a hitch, but the remote server feels like a brick wall. It can be really disheartening, especially when you have important data to analyze. Here's the specific situation we're addressing. One user asked how to connect to a MySQL database on a remote server that requires SSH authentication. They mentioned needing to manage both the SSH credentials and the MySQL user login information. Sound familiar? Let's dive into the solution. So what makes this connection tricky? The need for SSH authentication adds an extra layer of complexity. You have to establish a secure tunnel before you can even think about logging into your MySQL database. But don't worry, we will break it down step by step. And stick around. At the end of this video, I'll share a pro tip that can save you time and headaches when connecting to remote databases. To connect Power BI Desktop to a remote MySQL server that requires SSH authentication, the user should first set up an SSH tunnel. This can be done using a tool like PuTTY or OpenSSH. Next, the user needs to configure PuTTY or OpenSSH. If using PuTTY, they should enter the remote server's IP address and specify the SSH port. Then, under the SSH section, they should set up the port forwarding. After setting up the SSH tunnel, the user should open Power BI Desktop. In Power BI, they will select Get Data and choose MySQL Database from the options. Now, the user must enter the MySQL database credentials. This includes the database username and password, which are different from the SSH credentials. Finally, the user can click Connect to establish the connection. If everything is set up correctly, they should be able to access the MySQL database through Power BI. Fun fact, the concept of SSH was developed in the mid-1990s to secure remote logins. It's amazing how far we've come in securing our data. Now, let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach suggests that connecting remotely to your MySQL server is possible, but it may not work through an SSH tunnel on port 22. Instead, you might connect using the standard MySQL port, which is 3306. It's important to ensure you have the correct version of the MySQL Net connector, with version 6.6.5 currently recommended. Additionally, check your server and database settings for closed ports, user permissions, and bind address issues. Before trying to connect with Power BI, it's advised to use a utility like MySQL Workbench to troubleshoot these settings. That's it for that answer. Let's take a look at another one. According to another user, connecting Power BI to a MySQL server over SSH is currently not possible. They mentioned this feature is under review and encourage users to help prioritize it by upvoting on the Power BI Ideas forum. Now, let's shift our focus to a different response. One user points out that connecting Power BI to a MySQL server over SSH is not currently supported. They mention that many people, including themselves, are looking for a solution. They also provide a link to a Power BI Ideas request for this feature. That's it for that response. Let's explore another one. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests creating a gateway to connect to the server. After setting up the gateway, you will be prompted for a connection string where you can enter the server port along with the database username and password. Let's take a moment to review another user's answer. One user found that the issue was related to the firewall configuration on the remote server. They discovered that Power BI does not support dual authentication steps, such as using SSH to connect to the server and then accessing the MySQL database. They thanked another user, Robin, for highlighting this important point. Here's the pro tip I promised. Always keep your SSH client updated and use strong passwords for both your SSH and MySQL accounts. This will help keep your data secure and your connections smooth. And there you have it. You should now be able to connect Power BI Desktop to your remote MySQL server with SSH authentication. If you found this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button for more tips, and remember to share your success stories in the comments.